As Utah prepares to enter the Big 12, it's time to get to know some of the opponents that they will be playing. We're going to be talking about Utah and Baylor in this Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor podcast on today's Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor crossover.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If it's your first time listening to our shows, make sure you like and subscribe. We love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our personal handles or our shows on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime, you can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and download the Gametime app with that code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's crossover episode by Cam Stuart, the host of Locked On Baylor. And look, Cam, Utah and Baylor played each other last year. A game both sides would probably like to forget. Backup quarterbacks, injuries, ugly all the way around. It was a wild game. This year it's a non-conference matchup because of the weird scheduling thing. So even that will be weird. But Utah and Baylor are going to get familiar with each other. So this is something I want to start to do with all of the new Big 12 hosts and schools. Just kind of start to get to know the new programs that Utah is going to be encountering. So give us an overview about the current state of the Baylor football program.
Well, JT, thank you for having me back on again. I appreciate that. I was on with you like literally before I was even doing episodes for Locked On Baylor.
You're right.
Appreciate being back. The state of the football program right now is not great. It's a transition. Obviously, 3-9 year last year. Yeah. You guys got to see firsthand one of our best games of the year, actually. So it wasn't a season to remember. They stick with the head coach when a lot of people thought they weren't going to. So Dave Aranda is back. But there is cause for some optimism in that they brought in Jake Spavital, who is like the quarterback whisperer of the last 10 or 12 years. The quarterbacks he's worked with has been incredible, like Johnny Manziel and Kyler Murray and even Davis Webb. People forget he was a good college quarterback.
Yeah, Davis, you're right.
Yeah. And they bring in like a high tempo, up tempo, I should say, high octane offense that is very similar to the one we think very similar to the one that they ran about 10 years ago with great success under Art Briles. So I think that brings in a lot of optimism. New quarterback at the helm, probably going to be DeQuan Finn, the transfer from Toledo, who's the MAC player of the year. So reason to look up, but it's cautious optimism right now with a coach who might be on the hot seat going into the season and a lot of turnover, a lot of change within the coaching staff, but bringing a lot of players back.
Yeah, it is two programs, and kind of like Utah is the definition of consistency, right? They didn't make a single change to the staff. You know, all the jokes about Cam Rising coming back for a seventh year, obviously, which he's able to do because he missed last season. And I think that will be the biggest thing I would expect to change. We'll talk about this year's matchup more in the second segment, but from when Utah saw Baylor last year, and like you said, you guys expect your offense to be better. From Utah's perspective, I expect Cam and this offense to get back to the group that put up 38 points per game back in the 22 season, not the group that was in the low 20s back in 23, because that's just the reality of playing with a backup quarterback, as Baylor, obviously, like you said, had to experience very well too. So it is interesting, but this is a Baylor program, to your point too, that does have, there's a reason Dave Aranda got an extra year, right? What he was able to do a couple years ago when you guys broke through in the Big 12 wasn't that long ago at all, that you guys had a season which you were 12-2. So do you feel confident that it's going to be Dave Aranda after this season? And you said it's kind of a rebuild, but do you like the direction things are heading in? And what should Utah fans kind of expect from Baylor year in and year out?
Yeah, I'll say this. I love all the moves they've made. And obviously we haven't kicked a ball since then, but I've really liked the personnel that they've brought in. I was big on the Spavital train from day one, and I really loved bringing in Finn, the quarterback. They've brought in some nice pieces offensively, so I am cautiously optimistic. I think this is going to be a work in progress in terms of that offense, but once it gets humming, it's going to be fun. It is going to be fun again, if not great, at least fun, okay? And I think partially what kind of goes into this leash with Dave Aranda is the 2021 season that you were referencing, 12-2, Big 12 champs, Sugar Bowl champs, and really the recent history of Baylor turning things around for the newbies of the Big 12. In the last 10, 12 years, the teams at the top and consistently have been, or at least in spurts, or Oklahoma and Baylor. Like we have been right there. And then, your TCU's had a couple of good years in there, but I mean, Baylor's been more successful than Texas has been the last 10, 15 years. Absolutely. In this conference. And it's shown with 3 Big 12 championships, BCS bowl games out of that, 2 near trips to the college football playoff. So we know how great seasons can be when you almost make the college football playoff. Okay. Baylor's had a couple of those, and they've been able to pull themselves up by the bootstrap before that 2021 season. That was coming off a 2-7 the year before. So the last time Baylor kind of bottomed out, it looked like they had their best season ever the next year. So all of those things, I think a little bit of that program mystique, if you can even call it that, of the last 10 years will say, yeah, maybe, this guy has done it before. We've seen the program build itself back up. Maybe it's kind of a yo-yo program and we're going to be back up on the up.
There's actually, to me, a lot of similarities between not Baylor last year per se, but what you mentioned, the last 10 years of Baylor football and Utah football. And I specifically look at the head coaches, whether it is a Matt Rule or last year, or what Dave Aranda's had success doing in Kyle Whittingham, the standard in the way they play, where this is a team that will run the ball, be a little bit more physical in the trenches, has some guys you hear their names called in the NFL draft versus, a lot of the Big 12 doesn't always have that perception for their defensive lineman and offensive lineman versus Baylor has tried to be that too. And, Utah and Baylor do have something funny in common. It's Charlie Brewer. Charlie Brewer was a lot better back when he was with Baylor than he was with Utah.
Dude, my secondary studio, which is the one I didn't like as much in my bedroom, has a Charlie Brewer jersey hanging up. So that's a real disappointment that we didn't get that in the background today. You just got to trust me, I guess. It's on my Twitter. I mean, you can see it. That's how I announced I was taking this job, was wearing a Charlie Brewer jersey. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's your first
Charlie Money, man.
On X, I forgot about that. But I mean, to your point too, like I'm sure, Cam, there are some Utah fans who are listening to this. Like, why in the world does this guy have a jersey from Brewer? But that's the truth, is how good he was there. There was a reason he came in and originally beat out Cam Rising in fall camp. Like, that's where it's crazy how things can change with time. And, and he was a guy that never really, Brewer was a winner. Like, it wasn't like he always blew you away with the crazy, and Cam's similar, right? Like Cam, I don't know if Cam is outside of the magnitude of when he ran in the 2-point conversion against USC. Like, it's not like Cam Rising makes these plays that land on SportsCenter top 10. So like, these are
neither of them are Caleb Williams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like these gutsy, but both these teams have had some gutsy quarterbacks and just some physical teams that have allowed them to be successful when the conferences around them in the past have been a little bit more finesse. So that's where it's going to be very interesting to see how these forces collide this fall, because they will meet, even though it is strange to say it's non-conference. That is what's going to be happening. So want to talk about who has the upper hand, at least while we sit here in June, breaking down this matchup in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about our great friends at Gametime. Gametime makes getting NBA final tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. They have great last-minute deals, all-in-price views from your seat, and their low price guarantee. Gametime truly takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And there are so many fantastic features with Gametime, whether it's flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the games or event. How about zone deals where you can let Gametime choose your seats and you pick the section. Also, I love the panoramic view from your seats in the app, so you know exactly what kind of a deal you're getting before you buy. And how about the low price guarantee, where Gametime will credit you 110% of of the difference. Gametime ticket coverage is also exceptional, where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. You guys can take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets, especially if you're down there in Waco hoping to make it out to see the Dallas Mavericks try to get back into this series with the way Boston's looking so far. We'll see how that ends up going. But if you guys do want to get in on this deal, you can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. And that is capital L-O and all of college, but no spaces in any of those, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Cam, let's focus our attention to 2024. Yes. Utah, as we said, very forgettable game in 2023. These rosters will look different. Utah has some returners, like the defense in particular. And, Utah's run defense did not play great in the first half of that game. And then they really locked in the second half. And that's where we saw Baylor struggle to move the ball for a lot of it. Although they got that big pass. And then there was some penalties, and there was that ball. Should it have been DPI? So it was a crazy finish in that game. And now fast forward to this year. And I'm sure some Baylor fans will get mad at me for saying this, but Cam, it's really hard to win at Utah. The truth of the matter is and I will say, you guys have something in common with the last team that was able to do it. Both of you guys have green colors, but Bo Nix was pretty good, and they were a college football playoff team. That's the only team since 2018 that has come in and won in Rice-Eccles Stadium. Do you see a path where Baylor, in their second game of the season, with a lot of newness going on there, can getting to Rice-Eccles Stadium and get a dub?
Yes.
I like it.
Put it out there. Sure. Maybe because week one's against Tarleton State, which is not a state. Okay. So maybe Baylor just runs it 100 times in the game and there's just nothing on tape and they unleash this offense on the poor Utah Utes. That could happen, I don't know. Yeah. They are 0-1 in their last one trips to Utah, down the road about an hour to Provo. They did lose that game in double overtime. It was a classic. There's a chance because it's early in the season. And I think when I came on with you last year, I said there was probably no chance, and it ended up being a close enough game. So you never know. But I am not pandering to a fan base here. I've said it on the program before. I do have the Utes as my pick to win the conference. So I'm not going to sit here and say Baylor's going to blow them out. There's a chance because it's early in the season. And maybe they don't know any better and there's not a lot on tape on the Bears. But I think Utah is going to have a formidable team, I would say.
Well, you have the guy who hosts Locked On Utes on your show, so let me also talk to those Baylor fans who think you're a little crazy for thinking that think you're a little crazy for thinking Utah's going to win right away. This is a Kyle Whittingham and a Utah team that has been incredibly consistent. Yes, they were 8-4 last year. If I went through the number of injuries they had and the fact that their only losses, the fact that they were able to find a way to win in Waco is such a credit and testament to this team's overall strength. This is a top 5 run defense in college football last year. They lost one defensive end. Yes, Jonah Ellis was really good, but his strength as a pass rusher in games he missed, the run defense really didn't fall off there. Cam Rising is the only quarterback in college football that has won a Power 4, unfortunately now it's Power 4, not Power 5, conference championship twice in his career and is coming back. And I know he's coming off the injury, but he looked good in the spring game, and I'd much rather be relying on Cam to get back to where he was than a lot of other quarterbacks who it's like, well, they haven't proven they could get there yet, but they showed potential. Like Cam's a pretty sure thing. You add a 1,000-yard receiver in Dorian Singer, a guy who did it at Arizona, didn't go his way at USC, but they had a lot of mouths to feed, and not a lot of things went USC's way, right? You got Brant Keith, who's one of the best returning tight ends in college football. If you look at his overall production, 2 separate seasons with over 600 yards under his belt. And there's a reason I was talking about Baylor and Utah, the similarities. This Utah offensive line also does a really good physical job of running the ball. This is a Utah team that has 12 players that are coming back that were played a key role on one or both of those conference championship teams. So it's a stacked Utah squad, and that's where it's going to be very hard for Baylor to come in with a lot of new look pieces early on and beat them in Rice-Eccles Stadium, because once again, Utah has lost at home. The altitude is a huge factor. This is another reason Utah's probably the favorite. Altitude is a huge factor. It gets loud. I'm not saying it's one of the most packed capacity stadiums. Kirk Herbstreit said it the first game last year. It's one of the loudest stadiums you're in because of the way they trap the sound. in there, and the altitude's a real thing. It wears guys down, and you can't go against that home record. One loss since 2018 at home, and their starting quarterback didn't even play in the game. And I will be fair to Oregon. I think they still probably would have beaten Utah last year, but it's tough to beat this Utah squad. And it also sounds like with teams in the position that Baylor is, this is the type of game they'd probably rather have at the end of the season when you're clicking more with some of those new pieces that are kind of in. So that's where I feel like it'll be tough for the Bears, but I've also thought it might be challenging for Utah once everything started to go kind of crazy with the injuries. And hey, they found a win down in Waco, so you never know how things are going to play out in the fall, right?
That's true. And I do want to ask you kind of a general question here, JT, about, going into the Big 12. We're doing this whole series, so clearly you're committed to learning this new conference.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, I might be wrong on this, as someone who's chronically online, I believe it was someone from the Utah fan base who coined the truck stop conference, which the Big 12 has since embraced. I love being the truck stop conference. And you, JT, in particular, have seen what a real truck stop conference looks like. I don't know, something like the Big Sky. We love that kind of conference. Okay. So, Utah comes in. This is a much more stable conference than it was a couple years ago. You're bringing some of your buddies with you from the Pac-12. What is the overall, because I only heard about it from a year ago. So what is the overall feeling in the fan base of, all right, we can do, Pac-12's done. We can't change that. We're glad to be out of the WAC still. Like, let's embrace this Big 12 thing. Is that what it's like?
It absolutely feels that way. There is always going to be a small amount of fans who are vocal and negative. Cam, you and I deal with those every single day because we host daily talk show hosts. But the reality of the situation is, yes, if all things in a perfect world, I was a traditionalist. I liked the Pac-12. It was fun being a part of that conference, but that's not a thing anymore. And the truth is Utah is very lucky to be in the Big 12 because, like you said, there are a lot of programs in this conference that have that Power 4 stability, that are a strong brand and name, especially compared to what obviously Oregon State and Washington State are going through right now. So I think Utah is really excited about the opportunity this fall. I mean, this is a team that is pretty all in this year. Kyle Whittingham has openly talked about retirement. Could this be his last year? This, barring something insane, will be Cam Rising's last year of football. There's a lot of guys that have been around when this team won their first conference championship in 21. So I expect this to be the last season we see a lot of those guys. There could be, almost every spot from a guy that won a conference championship with this team back in 22. This should be their last run with the team before they end up going somewhere else. So there's a lot of newness and a lot of things expected, but it's an opportunity to form new rivalries. And this is the new era of college football. And I'm really excited for the opportunity that's ahead of Utah in the Big 12, because I think they can be really good and successful. And they're going to be challenged too, because there are teams, whether it is a Baylor, hopefully Dave Aranda gets it turned around this year. I like him. I think he's a good coach. It didn't go his way last year though. So we'll see if that happens. I think they're obviously Colorado. I know there's a lot of frustration with some of the things with Dion, but Shedeur Sanders is incredibly talented. And I do think, and they obviously took a step in the right direction. Like, there's a lot of programs in the Big 12 that feels like they're Kansas State, Kansas, obviously, right? Like these programs that are building step in the right way and building momentum. I think this is a great opportunity in the Big 12 for Utah to stay relevant, to play some really good competition too. And I can't wait to see how it all goes down this fall. And as sad as I am to see the Pac-12 officially come undone recently as they played their final game, I'm excited about the new potential and the history that's going to form in these new rivalries.
Yeah, like I think this is not a bad thing. Like, I think Utah slots in just fine with this group. Obviously Baylor's not the greatest comp because Baylor's a smaller private school. But I mean, you look at some of these, the Kansas States, the teams that are also coming in, like the Arizonas and the Colorados, a West Virginia, even like that feels like this is where these teams, I know geographically, maybe not so, but in terms of the school profiles and the program profiles, I think Utah slots in just fine. And plus it seems like we're going to be making a trip out there every year, whether it's to SLC or down the road to South a little bit.
You're doing a great job. Not
beautiful Utah.
I didn't even say before, like you couldn't say their name, but you're doing a good job. You're not making the Utah fans mad.
Look, I'm trying to honor this. I am. I try to honor these rivalries. We won't talk about that school up in Fort Worth. Nothing about 2009. Nothing there either. Yep. So perfect. We're on the same.
I didn't even think about it. I haven't mentioned them either. So I guess we're both. Hey, looks like maybe Utah and Baylor will be those two schools that like give that nod of respect to each other every time they play. Maybe we can be the friends.
Tip of
the exactly. Because we're not going to be that. There's a couple of Big 12 schools I already know we're not going to be that with. That is that is for sure. But Cam, it is interesting because Utah is in a great spot when it comes to competing in football this fall. I cannot say the same thing about the men's basketball team because they are not in a great position and they are entering arguably the toughest college basketball conference in the country. But thankfully, they're trying to take from a very successful program like Baylor because they've added 2 of their guys. Yes, Caleb Lohner came to Utah to play football. I believe he came to Utah to get his toes wet in terms of learning the position. This is one of the best tight end rooms in college. You have 3 tight ends who had over 100, who have had a season last year, or just the last full time they were healthy, who have over 180 yards. You got one with 180, one over 200, and then Brant Keithy, where I talked about. Like, I just don't see how Lohner is going to play. So I think he'll amazingly be a basketball guy. And Miro Little is a guy with loads of potential. I can't imagine Baylor shed a tear to see either of those guys go with the limited production that they got, especially from the points per game column. But try to give us Utah fans a little bit of hope about what these additions can be. Little in particular is probably going to be their starting point guard right now. And I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah, well, I'm like totally transparent here. There's not a lot of bad I can say about either one of them. Caleb Lohner, I think looking back, we probably had a bit too high of expectations for him when he came in from that other school in Utah.
Well, have you really quick, all you Baylor fans, do you know where he was originally committed to go?
Would that be the U of U? Are you?
When I was a sophomore on campus, I passed him on his visit. I thought we had him, and sure enough, he burned us and went to BYU and became public enemy number 1. And now he's made his way all the way back to be a tight end. Let's just say it's been a crazy cycle with Lohner.
What a ride, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What a ride. So yeah, he comes in and we're thinking, not like a shooter or anything, but a good rebounder, slasher, cutter. And he just didn't click that first year, which was 2 years ago, 22, 23. And he became comical of like, he played a possession without his shoe on. Like he would dribble it off his foot all the time. Like he would butcher wide open rebounds. And I think there was some animosity there. And then this past year, I think he fit into his role a lot better. Like was guarding the whole front court pretty well. He played physical. He still took a few too many threes, which was like 4 or 5 on the whole season, too many. And he just became I think a good energy role player off the bench. And then the Big 12 tournament comes around, JT. So watch out for this next March, because his game just like goes to another level when he gets to Kansas City for some reason. I don't know what it is, but he put up like a double-double in the Big 12 tournament last year. It was incredible. So in terms of the basketball portion of things, I don't see him being like an impact starter, but a guy who can fit a good role off the bench and give you some real energy. Because I'm serious, he did give them a lot of that this year. Now Miro is a guy I really like. I really liked him out of high school. And we knew it was going to be a little bit. He was not going to be a guy who's going to come in and be the starting point guard right away. This past year as a freshman. I think he's a real crafty player, definitely fits into like that European stereotype of a point guard, pass first, crafty. And I just think like 2 years from now, so maybe not this upcoming year, but the next year, I think he's going to be a real impact player. Like I'm telling you, I just think he grew so much in limited time here in Waco. When Langston Love got hurt, his role became a lot bigger on the team as kind of a backup point guard there, which Baylor has not had a lot of. And he came in and was a good defensive guy at first. He was making all the hustle plays. And then you started to see some flashes of, some bounce to him, some good passes. Like I just see him. I would watch him in warmups too, which I know is nothing. He's shooting against air, but I'm like, man, his shot's just looking better. Like he's developing a shot there. So I wouldn't be surprised if he is a creator and a decent 3-point shooter within the next year or two. And I thought that defense, which this defense of this last year was not the defense of like 2 or 3 years ago for Baylor when they had some of the best defenses in the country, but he's still impressed on that end. So you look at the numbers and there's not much you can take there, right? He didn't play a lot, about a point a game or whatever it was, a point and an assist a game. But I think Baylor fans saw enough flashes that you were like, man, I don't expect him to be an all Big 12 guy next year, but fully expect him to develop into a pretty good starter, I think, by his junior year. So I am excited about the Miro Little thing. I wish we didn't have to see him go, but it is a logjam at guard for Baylor this year and next year. So wasn't ultimately too surprised to see that. And look, I'll say this about basketball in general. Follow the UCF model, whatever they did, because they came into the conference this year and everybody wrote them off. They were like, this is not a basketball school anyway, even in the AAC, like they're going to be the doormat of this conference. And look, they didn't come close to making the tournament or anything, but they were as impressive as I've seen that program in the last 4 or 5 years since they had Taco Fall and they made the tournament. Like they gave some good runs. They beat Kansas at home. They beat UT on the road. They had another big win in there somewhere. Like they held their own. And even those games they weren't winning, they were hanging tight. They hung tight with Baylor. The Baylor needed a second half comeback to beat them in Orlando. So after seeing that, I can't just say, oh, Utah, come on, forget about them. Like maybe there's something. I don't know.
And I can see with the players that Utah has a world where they become that. It's not likely, but there's a chance. That's all I can ask for, right? I just need hope. And you've given me a little of that with the little pitch on Miro, as well as just, Caleb is going to get a little stronger and be the enforcer. So I think all of us Utah fans appreciate you giving us some optimism about those recent ads here.
Look, I try. And look, UCF, they were plucky, right? Mm-hmm. And that's better than being a doormat. Yep. That's better than being embarrassed. Okay. I think there is a chance I think their level just raised up. They saw Big 12 on the court and they were like, okay, we're going to be serious now. So Utes might be doing the same thing.
I think that's the hope. That is the hope. Fingers crossed about that. What's nice though, Cam, is we got a football season before I got to worry about basketball. So
fine. Okay.
I'm excited to see this Utah football team. And I am very intrigued by Utah basketball, just like I'm excited for all the new rivalries that Baylor and Utah are going to start to build this season, as well as all the other new Big 12 showdowns. It's going to be a lot of fun, Cam, just like I'm excited to do more of these with you. Thanks for stopping by today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. Anything I can let you know about the roadmap of the Big 12, you just let me know.
I will. And I just want to ask about that team in Fort Worth. I know.
Fine. We'll get there.
Yeah. Oh, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you guys so much for listening to Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor. And we'll be back with you very soon for more content.